Okay, Monday, 18th of August, 2025. So Adrian's daily vlog, sharing smart stuff men should know. Money Monday, Bitcoin and everything else. The coming epistemic shock with Bitcoin. Ignore and deny it at your peril. Now, a few months ago, I did a video about Bitcoin and Rocco's basilisk with regards to the pain of not doing something, even though you know about it now, will be compounded and exaggerated and amplified into the future. You could argue regret, a bit more nuanced, but regret fundamentally. Now, what I've also subtly noticed is that a lot of people tend to have mixed emotions and feelings in the market. Oh, the price is here, or whatever, it's too late, I've missed the boat. I did a video about this actually, when you know it's too late for Bitcoin and the price goes down. See, it goes down by a fraction of a few percentages, whatever, 2, 3, 4%. Oh, it's coming to an end, things like that. Because mankind, humans, civilization has never come across anything like Bitcoin before. I always say that Bitcoin is fundamentally maths, physics, and computer science. Mathematics, physics in terms of atoms and energy, computer science, open source code. So we haven't come across anything like this before. There was always other forms of currencies or other forms of money, even, commodity currencies, copper, gold, silver, or promissory notes, fiat and beyond. But something like this, enshrined in code, backed by energy and built using open source code, enshrined in code in terms of maths and the protocol, energy, proof of work, an open source protocol, permissionless, when you can earn, when you can spend, apolitical, decentralized, with a fixed supply, censorship resistant, things like that. Now, because of its first principles and the infrastructure being built around Bitcoin, I did a video about this back in November talking about the future businesses will be built on Bitcoin, Bitcoin native. Just how today, where it's internet digital native businesses, to build something purely in brick and mortar physical is a bit archaic. Now it's going to be purely online from day one. That infrastructure, that flip, that change, that standard is going to happen and be progressively normalized over the next 15 years. So by 2040 it'll be, or by 2040 it'll be unheard of to be not using Bitcoin in some fashion. Wow, okay. But of course, in the future. But that's going to lead to an interesting epistemic shock with regards to people. All this data, all this information, this epistemic lag, you could argue, that where they should be and where they are, with regards to the market conditions and situation and life, whatever else, where they should be, they need to quickly learn all these things that I've been talking about over months, but they'll have to learn it over hours and days and hours, let's say, because the world will just get faster and faster over the next 11, 15 years. They'll have to analyze and study all these things over hours to fully grasp what's happening. The longer people delay understanding and ignoring or studying Bitcoin, the longer that lag will be, in a sense of here's the general market, the infrastructure, the situation, and here's your knowledge, Mr. Individual. And you ought to be up here, just how today we understand a lot about social media intuitively, internet, whatever else, and you pick it up and use it, email, we just do it. It'll be like that in the future. The longer you delay studying about Bitcoin, the sharper that shock will be to go from where you are to where you ought to be, in a sense of the infrastructure, the market dynamics, etc., the general consensus, to go from these to gap this gulf, to close the gap. And over time, if you're stagnant, over the decades even, it's going to be up here where the market is. And to close that gap is going to be exponentially more painful the more anyone ignores or denies Bitcoin. And then we can go deeper to say, well, your worldview is going to be totally put on its head. Everything you understood about investments and finance and infrastructure and whatever else, and money and banking, you name it, other sorts of buzzwords, is going to be totally flipped upside down. And that is going to be another compounding shock that people in general are going to have to face. The psychological trauma of realizing their entire worldview, knowledge, structure, and life decisions were based on fundamentally wrong assumptions. Whoa. In a sense, we've been poetic, house built on rock versus house built on sand, with regards to fiat and its first principles, money you can earn, money you can spend, things like that, converted from Bitcoin into fiat, realizing unlimited, it can be censored, one node, There's one committee that defines interest rates, things like that, versus over here, protocol, physics, and open source code, maths. Wow, that flip. The longer people deny and ignore Bitcoin, the harsher that flip is going to be. Wow, interesting. And regret's going to compound exponentially. For many, it's not just going to be I missed the investment. It's mocked, dismissed, ridiculed. Just how in the same way, let's build a business on yellow pages. What's that? And the regret could even lead to identity collapse. But that's very, very personal and subjective, but the logic points to it. And then we could say the ego will double down as a defense. Many will not change. In spite of, many will deny it and continue along here, in spite of the market, the general structure, sentiment, infrastructure, everything is just getting better and better and better, expanding services and products. So that gulf is going to be huge. It'll be like someone saying, no, horse and carriage will make a comeback in 1910, you watch me, as cars get better and faster and cheaper, and horse and carriages are there, but suddenly there's this new kind of cars, new kind of technology that just makes it better. They'll attack harder, rationalize stronger, retreat into more complex justifications, build ever more elaborate denial mechanisms, trying to regulate, ban or censor or destroy it. Rather than admitting I was wrong, again going from here all the way up there, rather than doing that, hurts the ego, understandable, they'll double down. And these will ultimately be the laggards in the cycle of adoption. Not the late majority, but the laggards, those that have to adopt the technology because their product or service is discontinued. They have no choice. The vast majority of people use this. Like nowadays, no one goes out and buys horse and carriage because no one sells them to retail people. Polo or horse racing, things like that, a luxury. No one goes out and says, he's 17, let's learn how to ride a horse. Cars, no thank you. I don't need to bother with that. Let's have a horse in the same way. And not unique with Bitcoin, but amplifying the scale. Because this is, through history, Galileo, Darwin, Copernicus, Einstein, internet, AI, horses, cars, etc. Bitcoin is on the same magnitude, but this time applying to money itself. And because it touches every aspect of life, the shock will be deeper, will hit deeper than any prior epistemic revolution. Now that's quite an interesting statement, but quite well founded, because understand that Bitcoin as money touches every side of every transaction. There's a product and service, and then there's the money you use. It's the common denominator. I did a video about this a year or something ago, that Bitcoin's the new denominator. Meaning, go onto a Bitcoin standard, start valuing things in Satoshis and Bitcoin, and your life changes. Bitcoin standard. But as you value things in Bitcoin, things get cheaper, products get more affordable, things like that. There's a general epistemic revolution, an epistemic evolution, you could say, by going onto a Bitcoin standard as opposed to remaining on a de facto fiat standard, as in normal but not explicitly pointed and articulated, elaborated or enumerated, but it just is. Just how in the same way we could say today we live on a hyper internal engineized world, meaning internal combustion engines, cars, diesel, petrol, are normal. We live on a HTTPS-ized world. HTTPS, in terms of websites, is normal. Anything other than that, HTTP, is not recommended. So Bitcoin forces ontological humility, a sense of how we categorize the world, how we understand things. There's a famous quote by Michael Saylor: all your models are broken. Yes. And that's going to happen more and more into the future. Yes, okay. And at first I didn't quite understand what that meant exactly. But as you understand the technology better and study and see its world applications, it's going to get more and more models are going to change, are going to be broken, because the denominator is something that's got unlimited supply. As that changes, the denominator, so will the models have to be updated. Just how in the same way, the land speed record in 18 whatever was 45 miles per hour by a horse. And yet now we have cars, so the whole metric, the whole torque, the whole range of possibilities is much greater. So the land speed record is what, I don't know, 500 miles per hour, let's say. And what's that in horsepower? 500 horses. I don't know. I'm just throwing numbers around, but that. The humility required to adapt to Bitcoin is immense, because you're not just wrong about one field, but wrong about money, government, economics, finance, human behavior, praxeology, risk, sovereignty, ethics, power. I did a video about this as well, that risk and volatility are two different things with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the least riskiest thing there is. And what's interesting, I've been flicking through some books, a primer of Ludwig von Mises with regards to some of his core ideas, because I've been seeing this meme floating about. More Mises, less Marx. Very interesting, because that kind of is emblematic to where the world is going, the zeitgeist, the epoch, the founding myth, a revolution, a cultural revolution. That's a whole other conversation. And you can't cheat the phase transition. I did a video about this actually, that there's no loopholes in nature. Things will just happen. Bitcoin is not trying to convince everyone. Bitcoin simply waits. The longer people delay epistemic transition, the more costly that gap, psychological and financially, becomes. So over time, again, as the market develops, price goes up, the hash rate goes up, the infrastructure changes and improves, and you continue to deny it, that snap to reality is going to be exponentially quicker, costly, painful to the ego, things like that, because you simply refused it. And that, by the way, is Rocko's basilisk, the premise behind it. The epistemic shock of Bitcoin will not just bankrupt companies, it will psychologically bankrupt many individuals who cannot handle being this wrong. Whoa! Because humans have not come across something like this before. It's not in our scope of understanding. It's not in our reference. We haven't come across this before. We have nothing to compare it to. So that's fundamentally why a lot of people are looking at the price and thinking, oh, it's too late, I've missed it, thinking it's the top of the market and it's going to go sideways, and yet not understanding the first principles and the meme to say Bitcoin has no top because fiat's got no bottom. Meaning, when priced in dollars, Bitcoin has no limit because there's no limit to how many of these dollars that can be printed, fractional reserve lending, quantitative easing, who knows what else in the future. There's no limit to how many of them can be created. Powerful stuff. Very, very powerful stuff. Yes. So we could say then it's going to be bittersweet. On the flip side, I think that to say Bitcoin could be bittersweet in the future, as people know much about it, will be jealous of those that have any. So essentially, I think this gap could lead to a sense of bittersweetness with regards to how people perceive Bitcoin in the future, where they denied it for so long and they're not learning as fast as they could or should or ought to be, and they get jealous. Natural human emotion, jealousy. They got rich. Those people over there, they got rich for no discernible reason. How dare they? They cheated. They did something wrong. Oh, it's a scam. It's a sham. It's a swindle. What chicanery. I think at a real meta level, it could be bittersweet. And that's got, security, OPSEC, things like that. But that's very, very interesting to think about and consider. Very, very interesting. Yeah. But that's a whole other conversation. The bittersweetness of it. And even that's a conversation really for certainly by 2030. Until then, it's a bit murky. After 2030, certainly 2040 onwards, that's when I think there'll be a lot of bittersweetness behind it. How dare they? Resentment, anger, the pitchforks, the riots, the protests, bad reputation, things like that. But yeah, interesting. But otherwise, Adrian's daily vlog, sharing smart stuff men should know. Subscribe for more, and you will see me tomorrow.